Welcome to this introduction to psychiatric libel and slander of targeted individuals. We learn that the CIA has sought to discredit or dispose of targeted individuals. From operatives and analysts, we hear that psychiatric misdiagnosis, as libel or slander, has been its favorite method. We see unconstitutional detainment in action, and why statutes enabling it must be defenestrated per the U.S. Constitution. Finally, we enjoy Jeffrey Scaler's classic speech. In the CIA programs, the target is put through these phases as written in the documentation: disorient and confuse the target, use them for our purposes, and then dispose of them in any way possible. That's from Robert Duncan's summary of no-touch torture techniques in 2015. So how did the CIA and NSA dispose of their tortured targeted individuals? The CIA, NSA, DoD and affiliates lie about assaulting civilians with V2K or directed energy since Project Moonstruck in 1952. They cheat by flagrantly violating Fourth Amendment rights to surveil and torture civilians in our homes. Then they enlist criminal psychiatrists or psychologists to misdiagnose covertly tortured targeted individuals as paranoid schizophrenics or bipolar. Perpetrators endeavor to have targeted individuals evaluated for psychiatric misdiagnosis. The US DoD and CIA pioneered this from the 1950s with V2K in Project Moonstruck, yet psychiatrists maintain that hearing voices or sounds indicates schizophrenia rather than over half-century-old technology demonstrated in a companion video. Psychiatrists and the DoD, CIA, and NSA, consequently, remain morally bankrupt. From a CIA whistleblower, Dr. Colin Ross wrote his Bluebird book after receiving 15,000 pages of CIA documents on a Freedom of Information Act request. He confirms that the CIA's favorite way of disposing of its victims is to lock them in a mental hospital and try to throw away the key. He also proved that most of the board members of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation were CIA. A medical doctor and former CIA operative explained, "The week after I refused a false flag assignment to instigate war with Iran, I was kidnapped in Virginia, tortured in an underground CACI facility next to CIA headquarters, and injected with CIA designer drugs. After I was released, I was thrown into a mental hospital to try to prove that I was crazy." The CIA uses long-acting BZ and amphetamines to discredit people. Russ Tice, the NSA analyst who blew the whistle on U.S. domestic spying, was also thrown into a mental hospital to give him a record. "I had no previous psychiatric hospitalizations and had never been prescribed drugs by a therapist. The medical physician promptly let me out of the hospital as sane but suffering from sleep deprivation. It took many months before the effects of the BZ wore off." Perhaps no element of torture is more egregiously gaslight than stalking with directed energy. Can directed energy weapons, abbreviated DEW, really hit targeted individuals, TIs, at home throughout days and nights? Demonstrably yes, DEW passed through walls and even grounded Faraday cages more than mobile phone reception and Wi-Fi. We'll next see a 1-minute example from a bedroom in Massachusetts into which there was no conventional line of sight, verified by a supplier of shielding material for the U.S. White House.
They're ongoing directed energy weapon shots to the head. They're stronger right now to the back. It's in the vicinity of 1:39 a.m. March 16th, 2021.
Before I lose battery here, I just wanted to make sure. Is it okay? Do I have permission to record any of our conversations?
Sure.
All right, thank you. All right, bye for now.
He is indeed being microwaved, and our company deals in this. We've helped numerous people save their life because they can die. And it's a serious thing. We're not a fly-by-nighter. We furnish the White House with our product.
Less than 1 hour after verification of his microwave torture by a White House supplier, the targeted individual was unconstitutionally detained, as we'll see next. Liberty cannot be legally deprived for thought police without even any pretense of arrest. Police detaining this targeted individual simultaneously disabled a scheduled TSCM technical surveillance countermeasures investigation at the premises with an obviously planted clicking transceiver, swapped outlets, etc. CIA-affiliated Texans stalked the targeted individual to Florida and Massachusetts. The day he was first unconstitutionally detained, a Texan Happy Ending LLC, created in 2016, bought the condo where he was tortured from 2016 to 2019 with oversight in Congress. As his torture has included aggravated sexual abuse with Fourth and Fifth Amendments rights violation, all complicit in it, such as those we'll see in this next clip, face capital punishment with due process.
I'm being detained by police involuntarily. I asked them to not detain me. I asked whether I have a right to talk to a lawyer. They said no. Is that confirmed, gentlemen?
Yes.
Yes.
Psychiatric evaluation. Correct.
Psychiatric evaluation.
Yes. Would you like to take a picture of that for your documents?
This is what legally says that you have to go and you don't have a choice.
Can I read this before you detain me?
No. Let's go ahead and have
We're
you
getting in the ambulance now.
I can't be clear. Yeah. I'm asking to read the court order before you forcibly detain me, and you're saying no. I do not have the right to read the court order.
I'll tell you what, can we start getting you ready and we'll let you read it while we're getting you set up?
No, I'd like to read it.
We got a 20-minute ride?
Do I have a right to read it before I get in the ambulance?
No.
That I do not know, but it says basically bringing you to have Cambridge Hospital from this location.
I'd like to read it myself.
Okay, once you're in the ambulance, you can do that. We just need to get going because we're
so they're saying no. Is that right? They're saying no?
At this moment, I'm saying no. That is correct, sir.
Okay, I don't have a right to read the court order before I get in the ambulance. I'm going so that there's not a physical altercation. I don't want that with these people who seem nice. The process, however, is not right.
Okay.
The U.S. Constitution provides for arrest with due process, not involuntary detainment for thought police. All complicit in such devastating and flagrant Fifth Amendment rights violation, as in the prior clip, face capital punishment with due process. State laws enabling involuntary deprivation of liberty for slander by psychiatry, such as infamous Baker Act in Florida, have been void since Marbury v. Madison, 1803, must be defenestrated under U.S. law. No one can lawfully deprive liberty for psychiatric evaluation in the U.S. Legislators tolerating this face prosecution under 18 U.S.C. 241 to 242, including capital punishment thereunder. With V2K, microwave weapons and COINTELPRO-type stalking active since the 1950s, the misdiagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia was tailored to slander covertly tortured targeted individuals. We saw this has been the CIA's favorite method to discredit or dispose of them in any way possible. To appreciate how criminal misdiagnosis serves to isolate and discredit targets of covert torture without medical basis, we close with Jeffrey Scaler's 2006 speech, "Psychology is a Weapon."
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor to receive this award tonight, named for my dear friend and colleague, Thomas Szasz. As Thomas Szasz wrote years ago, the only true political virtue is obedience to authority, and the only true political sin is independence. Independence renders authority useless, and that is what infuriates it so. You've undoubtedly been told you're mentally ill for daring to say that the emperor called psychiatry has no clothes, not to mention stupid and unscientific. At least this is what some of my colleagues say about me at one university. So if this is something that has happened to you, I'm here to say that you're not alone. The controversy regarding the myth of mental illness and psychiatry is not about science or medicine, it's about power. When psychiatrists start agreeing with you, well then perhaps you ought to reconsider your position. Something may be wrong. So I'd like to say a few disobedient things, which is especially true because I was trained as a psychologist, and when a member of the profession criticizes its own, it's considered especially sacrilegious. What do we know that is true that the cult of psychiatry keeps telling us is false? First, the idea that there is a known brain lesion causing mental illness. The truth is, we cannot tell who is mentally ill and who is not by looking at pictures of their brains or analyzing their blood. Psychiatrists had to invent their own book of diseases because pathologists would have nothing to do with them. It's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, the DSM, a great work of fiction. What's the difference? What's the difference between the DSM and a scientific book of disease? Every disorder in the DSM is invented. Every disease listed in a pathology textbook is discovered. Real disease is found in a cadaver at autopsy. Mental illness is not. Mental illness refers to something that a person does. Real disease refers to something that a person has. Consider this yet another way. It takes one person to have a real disease. It takes two people to have a mental illness. If you're alone on an island, you could develop a real disease like cancer or heart disease, but you cannot develop a mental illness such as hyperactivity or schizophrenia. This is because mental illness is always diagnosed on the basis of some sort of social conflict. When people do something that others find objectionable, they can be diagnosed as mentally ill. If the person doing the diagnosing is more powerful than the person diagnosed, then there is trouble. In this sense, the diagnosis of mental illness is always a weapon. Not so when it comes to diagnosing real disease. Think of how, when people get angry with one another, they inevitably resort to some kind of diagnosis. They say, "You're crazy. You're mentally ill. You're paranoid." Can you imagine somebody getting angry with someone and saying, "You have diabetes. You have Parkinson's disease"? Social conflict has nothing to do with developing a real disease. You don't develop diabetes because someone doesn't like the way you think, speak, or behave. You have to have someone else present to judge that your behavior is morally good or bad in order to have a mental illness. So diagnosis is a weapon, a tool people use against one another, especially when there is some kind of power conflict present. And what of treatment? Treatment for mental illness is punishment. Look at our criminal justice system. When someone commits a crime and a psychiatrist is in the courtroom, a defendant may go to a mental institution instead of a prison. Can you imagine a judge saying, "I sentence you to treatment for your cancer"? I submit to you that psychiatric treatment is worse than prison. For in prison, they don't judge how long people should be deprived of liberty on the basis of what they think about themselves and the world. In a mental institution, of course, this is the case. If you don't think about yourself and the world correctly, you'll be punished longer. Psychiatrists love to say that mental illness is a real disease, just like cancer. The analogy between mental illness and real disease is not reciprocal. It doesn't hold both ways. Having cancer is not like being depressed. We don't shock people who have cancer to make them better, especially if they don't want to be shocked. Consider how melanoma, a deadly form of skin cancer, is a disease here as well as in northern India. If you have melanoma, does it cease to exist if you move to another country, another culture? Of course not. If you're wandering the foothills of the Himalayas and meditating for 15 hours a day, you may very well be called a holy man in India. Take that same person, have him walk across the grounds of the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C., and he's diagnosed a paranoid schizophrenic and committed to a mental hospital. What do you think psychiatrists would do if Jesus were alive today, or Buddha, or Mohammed? Bada bing, right into a mental hospital, injected with drugs to stop their crazy beliefs and speech. Psychiatrists today are the true grand inquisitors. They would crucify the holy men and women of yesterday in an instant. My father was sent from Nazi Germany to America in 1933 when he was about 15 years old. From the time he was sent out of Germany by his family because he was a Jew until his dying day 5 years ago, he had nightmares that the Nazis were persecuting him. He fought against them his whole life, awake and asleep. I used to ask him, "Dad, what were people thinking in Germany back then? What were they thinking when they saw the Nazis parading about?" And he used to say, "Nobody took them seriously. Nobody believed they could ever have the power to do what they did. We laughed at them." Now, while I encourage you to laugh in the face of those psychiatrists who argue that 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4, know too that we must also take them seriously, especially when it comes to the harm they have done to people in the name of helping them. For if we do not, history will repeat itself. We are building a resistance to the psychiatric Gestapo. The Citizens Commission on Human Rights is an important partner in the fight for liberty and justice. That is why we are here tonight, and that is why we will be together tomorrow. Thank you.